Found in this Range Rover. 3 dead men, no one knew who they were, what they were doing, or why they fell victim to cold-blooded murder.
This is a question everyone wants to know. Who killed Pat, Tony and Craig?
Another week, another rant. I hope you're well as you're listening to this. Well, unfortunately, the Steve Nipper Ellis follow-up Q&A to what dropped on New Year's Day has been postponed. It was originally meant to be with Liquid Bullet Productions, but it's no longer going to be with them. It's going to be with another production company, and will also this time feature John Womes, brother of Jack Womes. There's going to be an interview each and then one together, which, if you believe Steve Nipper Ellis's claim that his father is in fact the murderer of Tony Tucker, Pat Tate and Craig Rolfe, wouldn't it be strange for him to be sat next to the brother of the person that's been convicted for the last 23 years and was only released this year? I think one of the main questions that's going to be put to Nipper on his interview this time will be, why did you wait 4 years to come forward with this claim? But either way, these podcast interviews will be quite an interesting watch, so keep an eye out for them over the next few weeks. A few weeks back, several articles appeared in the newspaper. The first being on Saturday, which was the headline, "Is the Essex Boys killer still at large? The police ignored shooter link clue, ex-detective claims." That was about the last phone call that Pat Tate made on his phone records on the evening of the 6th of December. And that the person that he made the phone call to was never questioned by Essex police. In the article it states the final call made from Tate's mobile, apart from the one to his girlfriend, was at 18:26 and it lasted 17 seconds. It was never disclosed at the trial. And then the following day there was an article which then stated that Essex Boys killer was free at last. The media had finally got wind that Jack Womes had been released on parole, and the headline just stated Essex Boys killer free after 23 years. And on the following day, on the Monday, there was a headline in the Sun newspaper, "Are the Essex Boys killers innocent? After 23 years, were the wrong people jailed for the biggest gangland hit since the craze?" And this also followed a video that was released by the Sun on YouTube. Coming back to that in a minute. The following day, the Daily Mail had an article which was meant to have the first pictures of Jack Womes on his release from prison after 23 years on parole. The photos in the Daily Mail are of a person stood next to what looks like a gate, but it is actually a fence. A few hours after the article came out, it emerged that the person within the photos wasn't in fact Jack Womes, but it was another family member of the Womes family. A few hours later, the article disappeared from the Daily Mail online website. And the part of this that is not only unbelievable, the fact that the media have been waiting outside of the Womes family to try and capture a photo of Jack. Not only did they do that, they tried to get a photo of Jack near a gate. And that goes back to a rumour from a few months ago when Jack Womes was in fact on day release doing work in a garage in Ipswich. The media with photographers were said to be waiting outside of the garage trying to take Jack photos next to a Range Rover. Unbelievable as it seems, what that means is the media, regardless of what's going on with the case at the moment, and even the headlines that they're printing within their pages about the possibility that Jack could be innocent of the murders, they still are trying to get his photo taken next to the Range Rover or a gate. Unbelievable. Now, going back to the Sun video that was released on Sunday evening. It features Steve Nipper Ellis and John Womes discussing the case. John mentioning about the Pat Tate incident when he threw someone off a balcony. No, his name wasn't Mad Dog, and no, he didn't die. Also having the bottle smashed into his face, as seen in Rise of the Foot Soldier 3, and also in Bonded by Blood. It also features retired Chief Superintendent Albert Patrick down the lane describing the series of events of what Nichols describes what went on that evening. What slightly differs from this version is that he claims that Pat Tate was shot twice in the head through the unbroken window on the left side of the Range Rover, which does in fact go along with what Steve Nipper Ellis has said with his version, is that his dad shot through the unbroken window, with the glass actually being embedded into the head of Pat Tate. And he states that he believes the person that killed all three had done it before. And then the video goes on to Steve Nipper Ellis. Now, this may have been the reason why the interview, the follow-up to the Q&A, was slightly delayed, so he could do this Sun interview. And he does in fact go through the same story, which he has done on most of his other interviews and documentaries. The story of Tony when he tried to kill him, or tried to in fact cut off his hand or his foot. And then Nipper's luck, his Norman wisdom luck with guns when he tried to kill Pat Tate in his bathroom. And unfortunately, the gun, unfortunately for Nipper, the gun backfired or didn't work. It was a Frank Spencer type situation. It then says that TMI have interviewed Steve Ellis and have seen no proof to corroborate his claim. And then, interestingly, it states that TMI believe Billy Jasper's version of events. Well, who is Billy Jasper? I'm sure you've heard that many times and have heard his story. But if you haven't, once upon a time, in a land far, far away, Essex, there was a man called Billy Jasper. On the 14th of January 1996, Billy Jasper was arrested in connection with an armed robbery. He then went to go on to say that he drove the murderer to Rettendon on the evening of 6th of December, which technically would have been the 7th of December because he said it was after midnight. But he did leave false statements with the police and changed his story a few times. But the story he gave, the person he dropped off, has a connection to the last call that Pat Tate made on the evening of the 6th of December. When Billy Jasper was arrested back on the 14th of January 96, he told the story of how he was paid £5,000 by Jesse Gale to drive someone to the Rettendon area. Before driving to Rettendon, he drove to a minicab office to collect a Browning pistol. He already had a bag, a holdall, which contained a sawn-off shotgun. He then drove the person in the stolen car from Canning Town to Workhouse Lane, but instead of taking the main entrance from the main road or the alternative route from the Wheatsheaf pub, he took another route which came from Rectory Lane a few fields away, then made his way through the fields, taking with him the holdall with the sawn-off shotgun and the pistol. When the man returned, between 35 to 40 minutes later, according to Billy Jasper, he had two holdalls, one containing what was apparently 4 kilograms of coke, which was the reason for Pat, Tony and Craig being down that lane that evening. But the strange part about Billy Jasper's story was the time that he says he dropped off said person, which is called Mr. D, to the area, which was after midnight. Considering there are no phone records that have been released, no witness statements, no sightings of the three or the Range Rover after 7 o'clock, which would then go along with Darren Nichols' version of events, which is about as real as Father Christmas, if you believe in all that. When Jasper drove the police to show them the route he took, when driving past Workhouse Lane, the police just didn't believe he had a clue where he was going, and this discredited Billy's story furthermore. This is what Billy had to say when he was in court at the trial of Mick Steele and Jack Womes. The car that you're in, was it a stolen car? Yes. Could you tell us what make it was? A Fiat Uno. A Fiat what? Uno. Was it one man or two men that were in that car during the journey? One man. Apart from one man, was there a hodl in the car? Yes. Are you able to tell us what was in that hodl? Yes. What? A sawn-off shotgun and a handgun. And a handgun? Was that a pump-action shotgun? It was. Can you tell my lord in this jury, please, how you saw what was in that hodl? I looked in it. Do you know whether the hodl stayed in the car throughout that journey? No, never. What happened to it? It was took by a person. Where? Down the country lane. Do you saw where that person went? Over a gate and into a field. Did that person return? He did. With the hodl. With two hodls. With two hodls? Had there been two holders before? Confused. No. Were you able to see whether both holders contained anything on return? No. Where were they put? On the floor, the passenger side, the front seat. In what direction, sorry? Were you the driver? Yeah. And the driver throughout? Yeah. And what direction did you then drive? Back towards Essex, more or less. Woodford way. Sorry, Ilford? Woodford way. Woodford? Do you mean driving a car through Woodford way or going into the Woodford direction? A direction. To get it clear, on the return journey, was there one other man or more in the car? Just one. And without going into too much detail, in which area, what sort of address did you drop that person? A wine bar. Were you paid for driving that stolen car? Yes. How much? 5,000. Sorry? 5,000. When had you been asked to do this? A week or less before. A week, maybe less? No, sir. A week or less before, my lord. Were you asked, and tell me, if you were not, please, by the man who accompanied you in the car or someone else? No, it was someone else. Are you prepared to name that someone else? No. Are you prepared to name the man in the car? No. Apart from seeing two guns, did you see any gloves? Yeah. Where? On someone's hands. Not asking for by names. Okay, whom? The passenger. On the journey out or the journey back? Both. Or both? Both. What sort of gloves? Hospital gloves. Sorry? Hospital gloves. When you set out on your journey, please, am I right or am I not right that you had not seen the contents of the hodl when they set out? That is correct. When you set out, was there a hodl in the car? Yes. When did you see the contents? About halfway through the journey, when the passenger got out to meet someone. Was there a break in the journey? The witness nodded. When the person went to meet someone? That is correct, yeah. Are you prepared to tell us in what area that was? Upminster area. Upminster? What time of night are we talking about? It was around midnight sometime. Round about? Midnight. Use the phrase some or some time. Yeah. We have other, perhaps different meanings of that. Would you? An hour before or an hour after? Roughly how long did it take to get from Upminster to the lane? About half an hour, something like that. So, could you have arrived, would this be right or would this be wrong, at the lane at approximately midnight? Around that time. What did you say? Around that time? When you got into that car, having agreed to do the drive, and would you wait until I'd finished the question because I'm going to say something else? Do you follow? Did you know the purpose for which you were driving by and saying something else? I am perhaps interfering with my lord's ruling. If you fear that it would incriminate yourself, you need not answer. It was against the law. I do not understand your answer, I'm afraid. put the question again, and you remember that you do not have to say something which incriminates you. Put the answer again. When you set out on that journey, it having been arranged approximately a week before, do you follow? Did you know the purpose of that journey? And I add to that, you do not need to incriminate yourself. No answer. When the man returned to the car in which he was sitting in the lane, yes, go on, and then got into the car, which seat did he get in? The passenger seat. Was there any incident that happened in relation to your driving as to then went back to Westminster over the bridge? Do you know what bridge this is? Not off by heart, no. How far from the lane was the bridge? A couple of minutes, a minute. Would you be kind enough, please, look at the plan that will be provided to you in the jury white bundle. If you look at page 3, do you have page 3 in square B? There's a place called Battlebridge in Battlebridge Station. Does that mean anything to you? Battlebridge, please get your bearings. Yeah, I think so, yeah. Do you see there is a river, the River Crouch? Yeah. Just looking at that plan for a moment, do you see if you go up, there's something up Southwark Hill, you go to Rettenham Turnpike, do you see that? Yeah. Then you turn into Wooden Lane, up to Wooden Lane, left into Rectory Lane. Now it is there that I suggest you twice took the police. Looking at that plan again and answering questions to me today, do you agree that it's right? Possibly, yeah. And the bridge, there must be over the River Crouch. Are you able to help us whether it's that river or some other place? Do you not know? I can't remember. However, was it anything to do with the incident? Can you help us about that? It didn't give way. There was a giveaway sign? Yeah. Were you supposed to give way? Yeah. Do you give way? No. Was your passenger happy or unhappy? We weren't unhappy, just things you don't. A little bit later, Billy goes on to say, he was frustrated. Could you elaborate on that? No. Later on in court, Billy was asked about his relationship with Mick and Jack. Mr. Jasper, before today, when you came into court, have you ever had any communication or contact with any of these defendants directly or indirectly? No, not at all. Not at all? Do you know them? No, not at all. Not at all. The witness shook his head. None of them are friends or acquaintances of yours, are they? No, not at all. Have you ever had any communication with them whilst you've been in court today? No, not at all. Are you sure about that? Positive. Do you remember just before lunch, around about 10 to 1, the jury went out? Do you remember that happening? Not really. No. No? You were standing in the witness box when the jury left? Yes. That is the time. Do you remember that? Yeah. Can you remember what you did as they were going out? No. No? Did you not look at them in the dock? Just look in. It's a room, isn't it? It is a room. It is a room with a dock in it, is it not? Yeah. You know what a dock is then? Looks like. Yeah. When the jury were going out, did you not look over to the dock? Probably. Probably? And do you remember what you did when you looked over to the dock? No, just walking past. Never mind that. Do you remember what you did when you looked over at the dock? No, not at all. You do not. You winked, did you not? At who? At the dock. Rubbish. Rubbish? The witness nodded. You say it did not happen. Yeah. You have told the jury about a night you went somewhere in Essex and you've had a map put in front of you. I think you still have it open. Is that right? Page 3? Yes. Before the night that you have been telling us about, have you ever been to that area before? No. No? So that was the first time, was it? Yeah. When you went there that night and you told us about being in the car with the man, and you were going to the lane, and there being a field. Did you know what the area was called? After. You knew after, but you did not know that night. No. No? You can drive from A to B and not know the R. Yes, of course, but I just want to ask whether on the night you knew where you were. I wasn't lost, put it that way. You were not lost, but you did not know the name of the area that you were in. Rettedon. Did you know that night, or was that something you learned about later? On the way home. On the way home. You have told us already that you have spoken to some policemen in January 1996. Do you remember? Yeah. And do you remember they were asking about where you said you had been? Do you remember that? Yeah. Do you remember that before you went anywhere with a policeman, while you were at Forest Gate Police Station, you were shown a map? Were you not? That is correct. Sorry, what was that? Correct. Do you know why the policeman showed you the map? To see if I could probably point the place out. That is right. Did you point somewhere out on the map? I can't remember. You can't remember. Let me see if I could help you. If you turn to the white bundle that you have before you, Mr. Jasper, we have it at page 1. You have to go to a couple of pages, a map showing a large area of Essex, the one that you were looking at a few minutes ago. Just familiarise yourself with that. London is to the left-hand corner, Ipswich is to the right, at the top of the right-hand side. Have you acquainted yourself with it? Yeah. Was the map that you were shown when you were at the police station something like this? It could have been. When you were at the police station on this occasion, do I take it you had not read in the papers or heard on the news about the killing of the 3 men? Say that again? On the day that you were at the police station, in January 1996, I take it that before then you had read it in the newspaper or seen it on the television, the report of the 3 men being killed in the car. Is that right? Yeah, I think everyone did. Everyone had. Did you know when you read the papers where it was said that the killings had taken place? More or less, yeah. Where was that? Where was it? Where did it take place? Yes. Where did the report say? In the Essex area, weren't it? Essex. Anywhere more Pacific than Essex that you remember from reports? No, not really. Not really. It's not something really that you dwell over. It's a natural day occurrence in my life, things like that. So you don't really dwell on them. You cannot remember, you say, when you were first shown a map by a policeman, what you did. Is that right? Did you point someone out, though? Do you remember doing that? Pointing somewhere? I can't remember. You cannot remember. Could you find Chelmsford on that map, please? Yeah. Have you got Chelmsford? Yeah. If you put your finger on the O in Chelmsford, right? If you could trace with your finger in a straight line from the O about half an inch, do you see the words How Green? Yeah. Does that not ring a bell? No. No. Was that not the area that you pointed out to the policeman when it first gave you a map and asked you where the killings had taken place? Do you remember that now? Maybe. Do you remember being asked to describe the area where the killings took place? Maybe. Could you remember whether there was anything close by? To where? The lane? Yes. No, it was a garden nursery. A garden nursery? The witness nodded. And a car sales place. Do you remember that? Yeah. You do. Did the policeman, before you were taken, I will ask you about your journey. I can't remember word for word. You have told Mr. Lederman about something that happened on the way back from the lane. Do you remember about the give way sign? Yes, that is correct, yeah. Is that what happened on the way back, or did something else happen? Phone call. A phone call? Anything else? Did anyone get out of the car? After? Yes, on your way back. I don't think so. Do you remember telling the policeman that something happened on the way back? I can't remember. Can you remember telling the policeman that the man you were with dropped something into the river? I don't know about dropping anything into the river, because I couldn't see where the river was, if there was a river. I'm not asking. Do you remember telling the policeman, before you ever went out anywhere at all on the way back, the man you were with dropped something into the river? I can't remember saying that. You can't remember saying that? Did anything like that happen at all? I'm not prepared to say. You're not prepared to say. Why are you not prepared to tell us if the man got out of the car? Just not prepared to say. Not prepared, right. Can you help us to what time of the day you were talking about when you arrived at the lane? Around about 12ish? Midnight? Yeah. Could you remember what day of the week this happened? No. What night were you talking about? No. Whether it was a weekday night or a weekend night, you could not say. No. Could you remember the route that you and the man you say took from Upminster, from the London area, in order to get to the lane? Not off by heart, no. Not off by heart. Do you remember that policeman took you out and asked you to tell them where to go? Probably, yeah. Do you remember where the policeman took you out on the big route that you ended up at the Rettington Turnpike? That is a big roundabout with traffic lights. Does that ring a bell? No. Did you have your white binder open? Please, at the same map? Number 1? Could you remember what road and directed the policeman along? No. And this just goes along, making Jasper look like he's basically got no idea of what he's on about to this point. That is, when you get back to the roundabout the second time, having got it wrong the first time, having failed to get your bearings, the second time you got to the roundabout, you went straight to the A130 towards the top of the page. Do you remember? No, I can't remember. In fact, looking at the map, you went straight off the map, straight off the page. Does that ring a bell? No. I'm afraid you'll have to go back, if you would, to the page number 1, if you would please find Wickford. It is quite close to the bottom of the page. I'm pointing to it here if it helps. Just about there. It is in capital letters. Do you have it? Yeah. If you see the word Wickford and you go about half an inch diagonally to the right, do you see the word Battlebridge? Yeah. Just above Battlebridge, where I'm pointing it there, the little circle to the middle of the road, that is the Rettington Turnpike. Do you have it? Yeah. The road, could you follow with your finger? It goes right past Rettington, which is printed on the right. And you can see it goes up to the place near called Henningfield. Do you see Henningfield? Yeah. We can see that there is a crossroads there. You can see that there is a road that comes across. Yeah. Do you remember? That is where you took the police to that crossroads. Not looking at the map, I couldn't know. Not looking at the map. Could have been, but there's a lot of crossroads. Did you carry on as far as the petrol station close to the pub called the Plough? Does that ring a bell? It's just before we turn round. I asked him to turn around. This is before you asked him to turn around. That is right. It's not a fixture in my head. No, I appreciate that. But do you remember going past the crossroads and going to the petrol station by a pub called the Plough? No, not exactly. But in any event, I think what you do remember is that you asked the driver to turn around. Did you not? Yes. So go back along the A30, now going south into the opposite direction. Do you remember that? Coming back. What was it that you was looking for at that stage? Do you remember? Just certain objects to get my bearings. What sort of objects? Could have been a road, could have been a slit road, could have been a lane, could have been a number of things. Do you remember saying to the policeman, that farm must be round here? Well, I think the policeman was saying that to himself. The policeman was saying that, but you were looking for a farm in your mind. No, not really. Do you remember what the policeman said to you because you was a bit unsure? Were you not a bit uncertain about where you were going? Is that right? It was a big thing to say, wasn't it? Of course. So there was other problems in my head. Not just thinking about other things. You were thinking about other things, not just this. Enough things. Do you remember the policeman said to you he was not going to tell you where to go? He wanted you to tell him. Do you remember that? That's obvious, isn't it? You went all the way back, did you not, for the third time to the Rettendon Turnpike roundabout. Did you remember? No, you don't remember that. No, you do not remember that. You have page 3 again, our smaller map. You would have come here. Would you not? Would you, when you turn the car around, the police car, that is Mr. Jasper? Do you remember that this time you told the policeman to turn left, and that is Woodham Road? Does that ring a bell? Not the name of the road, no. Not the name of the road. But if you follow with your finger along Woodham Road, there is a nursery. Do you see that? Yeah. Nurseries. Yeah. Was there something that rang a bell? Yeah. It was. And if you go to the RD, in the observation for the road, do you see a left-hand turn that is Rectory Lane? Do you see that? Yeah. Does that ring a bell? No. No names. Ring no bells. But do you remember going to Rectory Lane at the police car? I can't really remember. You can't remember? I could have done. I do not know whether you can help us, but if you were to look at the map, could you not point out the approximate whereabouts the gate was that you said you stopped at? Was Rectory Lane the name of the lane that we stopped? You cannot remember? No, I can't remember the actual name. Whatever you did stop, take it for a moment, it was Rectory Lane, alright? If that was the road that you went up, could you help us approximately how far? You're the one saying where the road is I went up. I don't even know the name of the road. Would that be good enough to take from me for the time being? That is the road you went up for the police car, alright? That looks more like the road than a lane to me. It looks more like a road than a lane to you. Can I ask you this? What side of the road was the gate on as you drove up the police car? Left or right? Both sides. Both sides? Did you stop on the left or the right? They were both together. Opposite each other? So you have a gate on the left-hand side of the road and you have a gate on the right-hand side of the road. Going back into that night that you've been telling us about, that you were in a car with a man you did not want to name. When you stopped that night by the gate, did you stop by the gate on the right? On the gate on the left? I think more so to the left. More so to the left. You're talking about a lane about 8 foot, 10 foot wide. Did you have to leave the road to get to the lane? Can you remember if you did? Yeah, I came off the road. The man who got out of the car, you say, did he climb the gate? Yeah. Which gate did he climb over? The left gate. The left gate. What did you do in the car, did you say? Turned around and I waited. Right, how long did you wait for? Half hour, something like that? 3/4 an hour? No more, really. So does this mean the time is now getting on for 1 o'clock in the morning? Around that time, yeah. Around that time. Was there anything close to the lane? Any houses? At the bottom, yeah. There were houses. Yeah, but on the night, I didn't drive that far down. On the night, you did not drive that far down the lane. How close to the gate did you drive? Normal, I suppose you could say. Normally? How close to a gate is that you drive to? A few feet. Could you not see what was on the other side of the gate? A field. Could you not see what was on the other side of the field? No. Are you a person who has taken drugs in the past yourself? Yeah. Mr. Jasper? Yeah. What sort of drugs have you taken in the past? I think that's irrelevant. You do not want to tell us? I don't see what this has got to do with it. If you do not want to tell us, you do not have to tell us. Do you remember that night, if you were telling us about whether you'd taken any drugs? I had a little snort of coke. You had a little snort of coke. Was this before you'd arrived at the gate? That's right. What about the man in the car? Did he have a snort of coke? Maybe. Who had the coke? Whose coke was it? Passenger. Passengers. So we took the coke out? Yeah, he got it out. Are you saying you cannot remember whether he snorted any of his own coke? I'm not prepared to say. You're not prepared to say. Were you prepared to say when you were taken to the police station in January, when you were talking to the police in January 1996? Yeah. Did you tell the police in January 96 whether the other man snorted coke? Yeah, he did. He did. This is what you told them? Yeah. This is what happened? Yeah. He did. Did he snort once or more than once? More than once. More than once. Did he snort before he got out of the car? Yeah, he did. What sort of effect can you tell us does coke have if you snort it? Keeps you awake. It keeps you awake. Were you tired? Nah, not really. What was the man wearing? A tracksuit. Was that top and bottoms? Yeah. Anything else? No, I don't think so. Gloves. I cannot hear. Gloves. He was gone, you think, about 30 to 45 minutes, yes? Yeah, roughly. Roughly? You don't think of that time when you're sitting there. You just wait. I take it you were not wearing a watch. I don't wear a watch. When the man came back, where did you drive to then? Towards Woodford. Towards Woodford. Towards London. More or less. Not actually to London. When you was arrested by the police in January 96, you was arrested for something else entirely, were you not? That is correct. I think you are in prison now, are you? That is correct. Were you prosecuted for the offences in which you were arrested? Yeah. Was you worried when you was arrested about what might happen to you? No, not really. As far as you knew then in January 96, the man you were on about that night, the night you tell us about, was he under arrest or anything else as far as you know? No. He was still out as far as you know. Yeah, as far as I know. He was not in trouble as far as you knew. That's right. Until you told us what you told us in January, had you told anyone else about what happened that night? No. Do you know whether the other man has told anyone about what happened that night? I don't know. You didn't know that he had? No. So when you was arrested, although it was obviously something to do that no doubt you not wished for to happen to you, you were quite happy that you're not being arrested for what happened. What is that there? Hold on. Backtrack. So when you was arrested, although it is obviously something that no doubt you would not wish to have happened to you, were you quite happy that you were not being arrested? That's like a riddle. Basically, was you happy that you got arrested? Not necessarily. Because that is right. It is not... They talking riddles, aren't they? Because that is not right, is it not, Mr. Jasper? That you were not asked about that is not right. You volunteered it, did you not? You were the first to mention it. Is that right? Yeah. Could have been. Could be, yeah. Yeah. To get an easy time for the law. To get an easy time from the law. But that never happened. I went to prison, but I'm still here now. So I haven't gained nothing out of it. No, you have not. No. But you were hoping that you might gain something out of it, yes? Yeah, of course. Of course. That is why you said to the police what you said, is it not? That is correct. That is correct, for an easy time. An easy time? But I still got prosecuted and I went to prison. Went to prison? No favours. I'm still here today. Still here today. So I'm not gaining anything. No, because in fact, after you went to prison, after you went to the police, and after you were interviewed, they never got back to you about this, did they? The police. They never went to see you again to speak to you about this, did they? Mistake. About what? About what you told them happened that night. That's their problem. It may be their problem, but my question is, if the police never got in touch with you again to ask you more questions about it, did they? A couple of days worth. You was at the police station for a couple of days, were you not? Yeah. And after that, did they come back to you, did they? No, not necessarily. You were not arrested for anything else that had happened that night, were you? Or prosecuted? Nah. That night, the night you were talking about the police. That night you were talking about the police about. Did you ever hear anything about you were waiting for 30 to 45 minutes? Say that again, please. Did you hear anything? Any noises? No, not a thing. Not anything that sticks out to mind. Not anything that sticks out to mind. Nothing that sticks out to mind. No. Do you remember, did you know when a gun firing sounds like? Yeah, I think everybody does. You was awake while she was in the car waiting. Yeah. You said you did not hear any gunshots, did you? No. And then a bit later on, Jasper goes on where he's asked, are you still a frightened man, Mr. Jasper? I think everyone is frightened of something. Are you? Not most things. Would you describe yourself at present as being a frightened man? To a certain degree. Has anyone spoken to you in prison about this case? No. No? No. Sure about that? What? Other inmates and staff? Inmates? No, not at all. What? What about while you was at court? Has anyone talked to me about it? Yes, downstairs. No? Nobody? Just the people that the judge sent down. That was the lawyer. The lawyer? Have you been threatened at all? No, not at all. Is that right? Is that what you say? The witness nodded. You remember you told us that he was wearing a tracksuit top and bottom and gloves? The witness nodded. They are those hospital type gloves that you described earlier, are they? That's right. What you were not asked, what was he wearing on his feet? Trainers. Now, moving on for that night, tell the jury this. Before you'd returned in January 96, was the visit that you made to the precise location in Redden the only visit? Yeah. The visit you had told the jury you went on, clearly in darkness. That is correct. Finding your own way of course by the use of the car headlights and whatever light there was, yes? And a bit of direction. Direction from whom? From the passenger. You were asked many questions about the first time you took the police there on 15th of January. I would like to tell the jury this. What time of day or night was that? Dark or daylight? Daylight. You twice, I think, used an explanation using the words getting your bearings. Probably. Well, the police in the vehicle, is that what you were trying to do? Yeah. Did it make it any easier, the fact that you were now in the area in daylight as opposed to somewhere you'd been in the dark? Yeah. It was a bit easier, but you were concentrating on whether you'd not answer that particular area around Rettenden, is that right? Yeah, because of the dark, it's like you look for certain things stick out in your mind. They look different during the day. And this place at which you ended up with the police officers, was that the spot at which you'd ended up with the man on the night that you'd been talking about? By the lane with the two gates. Say again? Down the lane by the two gates. Okay, of course, I cannot ask anything else that was said between you and the man. I did not go anywhere near it. When you were talking in place to the police in January about this matter, I think, did you not name names of the people involved? Is that right? That's right. Why did you say that? Just tell the jury why you named names as opposed to making up names. Well, because it's not made up. Because it's not made up. Unless your lordship has questions. No, thank you. Thank you very much, Mr. Jasper. So as you can see from the question, so first of all, I'm sure you've already heard all that before on Crime Scene's channel. Crime Scene's Courtroom, he's read out the Billy Jasper's in court on there already. But it was just to sort of show you that in court, when it came to the questions, the wink to Mick and Jack in the dock, the apparent wink to Mick and Jack, which I've heard is not true, just made Billy look like he was lying. And then unable to take the police back to the site where he says he dropped off Mr. D, who then disappeared over the fence. Apparently there was a fence on both sides down Rectory Lane. The courts made Billy just sound like he didn't have a clue, was even possibly lying for the fact of even driving anyone out there, let alone the fact of he was on coke that night and probably wasn't exactly looking for places to say, oh, you know, there's a thatched cottage over there because when I'm back in the area, just in case I need to come back here at all at any point. Billy was not expecting to go back to that area probably at any point at all. So it's not exactly he's looking out for anywhere, but did in fact guide the police back to Rectory Lane. And as you know, spoken about earlier and as seen on the video, there is a way of getting from Rectory Lane to White House Farm, Workhouse Lane itself, the site of the murders. And that is in fact what Mr. D apparently done that night. The midnight part of Jasper's story is the part that sticks out, if anything, because no phone records ever released from 7 p.m. onwards from Pat, Tony and Craig. And those statements, no sightings of all three. There is the Craig Rolfe statement being seen in the pub with the person that the witness could not describe the other person that he was with. Whether that's true or not, there is no other statements no other sightings of the Range Rover that evening. So on all accounts, Darren Nichols' version of events does look true. Only that time part of it, his actual story in itself, we won't go there, but the time does look like it's true. There were witness sounds of shootings at 9 o'clock, and then the ones after midnight, which look like they go with Billy Jasper's story. But Billy Jasper himself not admitting to hearing any gunshot sounds that night. If he'd have come back and the story of dropping Mr. D over the fence and going to the site, the scene of the murders, had been in fact the same time, and Billy had heard shots and roughly gave the same time as the man that heard the shots, around about 12:30 in the statement, maybe then people have had more belief in his story. It's only just until recently with TMI saying that they believe Jasper's version of events, and over the last few weeks, what I'm going to get into later, which is more information's come out regarding Billy Jasper, it does look like his side of events is true. Now, going back to his original police interview, there is some audio from that which I'm about to play. The first part of it you can hear quite clearly, where he's talking about dropping the man off and him coming back with the two holders. There is a second part. It's quite hard to hear. You're going to need to hear to wear earphones or headphones to that part to even hear certain words. He does say he picked up a man that was wearing a tracksuit and Reebok trainers, and this is that audio.
Away. He's gone how long? About half an hour, 40 minutes. Right, what the time now, Ben? About 1:30. When he comes back, what happens then? He's got two holders. Yeah. What's the second holder look like? Just like a rucksack thing. Oh, like that? Yeah. Do you remember what it was like, what colour? What did he say? He got back in the morning until let's go. 6'2". And that. What are you doing stuffing that for? Yeah. Oh, okay. Is he a bodyguard? Yeah. Got in the car. Still got his description. You want that? I want that. What's the way? Wearing a really much like Chelsea or is it one of these? It's up there too, but I can read some of the hand is playing out there, whatever it's the last time you could start that and start that ankles. There's a cool guy. Was he wearing them at the time when he came to the car? More trainers, Reebok trainers. And what was he carrying? Velvet black headband.
Apologies there if you couldn't pick up much of the second part of the audio. Like I said, you need to have earphones or headphones just to even pick up certain words. From what I got, from what Billy was saying and the police on the second part of the audio, was that they asked Billy if Mr. D is a bodybuilder. I don't know if that's just a general question to get a frame size, or whether they're trying to connect him to Tony's supplement shops if he still had them at the time, or if it's a reference to Pat. Trying to get a connection to either the three deceased. And then they mentioned about a moustache, and then the tracksuit that Mr. D's wearing, and the fact that it's, Billy mentions that it's cotton and not a shell suit, and that he's also wearing surgical gloves. And then he mentions about the white Reebok trainers that Mr. D's wearing, which I wonder if he's the size 8 footprint that was found at the scene. The lack of footprints being one of the big mysteries about the case. The fact, did they melt in the snow? Did Ken Jiggins and Peter Fearbold actually drive over any footprints of anyone leaving the lane. I think anyone with any sort of common sense, even with the snow there, wouldn't have left a trail of the route they were leaving for anyone to sort of follow. But with the what seems lack of police interest that morning to find any evidence, there is several pieces of footage on YouTube of the police that morning, and some of them just look like there's no effort at all, kicking grass, like, oh yeah. And then what's interesting at the end of the audio, I don't know if you managed to pick it up, but there is mention of the head bag, the classic head bag that's always mentioned within this case and surrounding this case. But he mentions it's black, but he does say something come black. It does sound to me like he says velvet and black, but I don't think that's the word he uses. Like I say, that classic head bag that I do remember quite a few people having it back at school in the 90s. And what's strange about this case is that it does often come up, but it's come up a few times. It's the same bag that was found in John Marshall's Range Rover when he was discovered murdered. Head bags and high tech do seem to be the common theme within this case that often come up. Now, going back to the time of Billy Jasper, stating whether it's true or not that he dropped the person off after midnight, which has always been sort of the mystery of Jasper's story of, if so late, where were Pat, Tony and Craig up at that time? And one of the parts of the thought that was going through my head at one point was maybe the guy that Billy Jasper dropped off wasn't actually sent in there to kill all three, was sent in there to do the cleanup. Now, what never occurred to me is of who sent him in to do the cleanup, or maybe just to, set it how it was found the next morning by the farmers. And then funnily enough, on my YouTube feed, a crime scene to courtroom video came up about Billy Jasper and how the guy that does the videos of crime scene to courtroom had a theory that Billy Jasper was the driver of the guy that was sent in to do the cleanup, but was actually sent in by Mick Steele. Mick Steele happened to be there when the shootings took place. He was maybe possibly part of the reason to get them down there. And then realised that he was going to be set up later on to be the fall guy for the crime, and sent in Mr. D with Billy as the driver to clean up any evidence of Mick being there, maybe setting cartridges down. I don't know. The crazy theory that went through my head, and this often goes through, I don't know why I think this, but it is the fact of Mr. D going there with the pump action shotgun, and the fact of Tony being shot and Pat several times. Was Mr. D sent in there to possibly let off shots around the Range Rover or into the three again, just to try and mess up times with the people that were the witnesses of maybe the proper shootings that took place at 9 o'clock. There were shots heard at 9. Maybe that was the original murder shots, and Billy Jasper's guy was sent in there Mr. D was sent in there after midnight to set the scene and to take more shots to the three, just to mess up the pathological reports, the time of death. But it's more than likely, if Mr. D was sent in there, he is actually the shooter. And the 4 kilogram coke was the law to get them there. And maybe, in fact, Billy Jasper's time that he states on his statement was in fact a mistake, and he was driven there earlier. Or maybe, as what a lot of people do think, is that the deal took place, this is pretty much out there, at 6 a.m. in the morning. It has been said by a certain person on an interview with James English, whether he made a mistake and meant 6 p.m. It is said 3 times, and he does say in the morning, that time of the morning. Whether that person on the on the James English interview, does believe that his deceased friend, was killed at that time of the morning. And maybe it's that was when Billy Jasper drove that person in. I mean, it's hard to tell. Like I say, I mean, the audio that is out there, it's Billy's version of the midnight. Drops the person off just after midnight or about 12:30. And again, there is a witness statement of shots being heard around about 12:30. Is that Mr. D killing all three? Is that Mr. D just letting shots off, which is out there? That's a pipe theory. That's what I class as a pipe theory, because it sounds like, you've been on the pipe when you say that one. Or was it early in the morning? Or is Billy Jasper he stood up in court and had no reason to stand up in court. Well, he was made to go to court, but he had no reason originally to bring up this story. And he did mention names originally and then wouldn't mention them in court. Whether it worked out, it wasn't that clever to go around shouting names off in court. But going back to what was said, or what Billy Jasper said in court, this was what was said about Billy Jasper in court in the summons up a bit later on in the trial of Mick Steele and Jack Worms. This is from the summons up from Wednesday the 14th of January back in 1998. And this is from Mr. Justice Hidden. You heard from William Jasper. He told you he attended as a result of a witness summons. In January 1996, he was seen by the police in connection with matters affecting him, and he was interviewed. He gave the police oral and written accounts of matters he'd been involved in Rettendon. He gave a detailed account, but it was hard to remember where he was. He said he did not know Michael Steele or Jack Worms, had never seen either of them before or had any association with them. The day before he gave evidence was the first time that he knew he might be required to come here to give evidence in this trial. In cross-examination by Mr. Lederman, he said he had been arrested on the 15th of January 1996 in connection with another matter. He said it was an association of major criminals, sometimes connected with major robberies and drugs, including cocaine. The drugs involved sums of 300,000, that sort of amount. The criminals were those who had no ambitions of shooting each other if they fell out. He wrote this statement at Forest Gate Police Station. He would prefer in court not to name the names he had previously named. He told you that he took police officers on a journey once or twice, but it was he who directed them. The route was at his direction. He had taken that journey before. He was pointing out to the officers the route for something that he was witness to. At that time, he was driving a stolen car, a Fiat Uno, and there was a man with him in the car with a holdall. In the holdall was a pump-action shotgun and a handgun. He looked in the holdall during the journey. The holdall was taken by the person down a country lane. The person went over a gate into the field and returned with two holdalls. He was not able to see whether both holdalls contained anything. They were both on the floor in the passenger side. He then drove back towards Essex in the Woodford direction and dropped the man in a wine bar. He was paid £5,000 for doing that. He had been asked to do it a week, maybe a week less before. He was not prepared to name the person who asked him, and he was not prepared to name the man in the car. The passenger on the journey out in the back was wearing hospital gloves. He had not seen the content of the holder when he set out. He saw the contents halfway through the journey, when the passenger got out to meet someone. He said he was in the Upminster area, around about midnight or sometime an hour before or an hour after, so at that stage he was giving himself a 2-hour bracket, either an hour before midnight or an hour after. He said having agreed to do the drive, he did not know the purpose of the journey. When the man returned to the car in the lane, he got in the passenger side. They had gone over a bridge, but he did not know which bridge. He thought it was a couple of minutes away or a minute. He looked at Exhibit 3, the plan, and saw on it a route left into Rectory Lane. He was asked if that was where he took the police, and he said it was possibly so, but he could not remember if there was a bridge. There was a give way sign. It was supposed to give way, but he did not, and the passenger was very unhappy. As to the date, he said he could have told the police it was the end of November or the beginning of December. It was unusual to name names. In cross-examination by Mr. Monday, he said he did not know the defendants at all, and he had no contact with them before that day. Before that night drive into that area at all. He could drive from A to B and not know the area. He was not lost, and he knew he was in the area of Rettendon on the way back. He said he was shown a map by the police to see if he could point out the place, but he could not remember it, and he could not remember it if he did point it out. He could not remember pointing somewhere out at all. He had read in the papers of the killing of the 3 men in a car, and the papers had said Essex. How Green did not ring a bell, but it might be How Green was the place he pointed to. He remembered a garden nursery and a car sales place. Then again, as to the time he was asked, and he said he arrived there around midnight-ish, but he could not remember what day of week it was, whether it was a weekday or weekend. He probably knew that the A127, but he was not good at reading maps. He looked at the Rettendon Turnpike on the map. We went past at first because I could not get my bearings. We turned round and went back to the Rettendon Turnpike. He was looking for certain objects to get his bearings. He did not say that farm must be round here. It was the policeman who said that. He had other problems in his head, and he was thinking about other things, not just this. That time he told the policeman to turn left. The nursery rang a bell, but names did not ring any bells. I don't know if Rectory Lane was the lane. There were gates on both sides opposite each other. As to the gate on the left, you had to leave the road to get to the lane, and then a man climbed over this left gate. I turned round and waited half an hour, 3/4 an hour. The time was getting about for 1 o'clock. As to whether there were houses at the bottom of the lane, he thought there were, but he did not drive that far. It was a few feet to the gate, and there was a field the other side of the gate. He could not see what was on the other side of the field. He had taken drugs himself, but he did not see what that had to do with it. He was talking of taking drugs that night. He said he admitted that he'd had a snort of coke before he arrived at the gate. He said maybe the passenger had had a snort of coke. He at first said he was not prepared to say if the man snorted the coke, but then told the police the man did snort coke. The man was wearing tracksuit tops and bottoms and gloves. He said he'd been arrested for something entirely different than this. He was now in prison. He was prosecuted for offences from which he'd been arrested, and he was not really worried about these offences. As far as he knew, the man was not arrested for anything and was not in trouble. He had not told anyone else about what happened that night. He had first mentioned what happened that night to get an easier time from the law, and was hoping this would be the outcome. After he was interviewed, he was kept in the police station a couple of days. After that, he was not arrested or prosecuted for anything else that happened that night. He agreed he knew what a gun sounds like. He said he was awake in the car whilst waiting, but he did not hear any gun sounds. He said he was possibly aware that a record was made of what he had said at the police station, and that someone told him that the documents were going to be disclosed to the defence lawyers. He was told what was going to happen a few months back, possibly early in 1997. He said he was not frightened of most things, but to a certain degree he would describe himself as a frightened man. He had not been threatened. In re-examination to Mr. Parkins, he said the passenger was wearing hospital gloves and trainers. The visit to Rettendon was only his first visit, and it was done in darkness. The directions came from the passenger. He was finding his way by the way of lights at night. It was the daylight on the 15th of January, and it was easier with daylight than dark. When he spoke to the police in January, he did name some people, because his account was not made up. Members of the jury, that was his evidence in relation to what he said he did at a date he did not identify, and at a time he gave us at around about midnight. But if you remember, first of all, he said an hour plus or an hour minus. You are aware, of course, there is no evidence from a pathologist or from a doctor who attended at the time of death, and that evidence may be partly directed to suggest a time of death at around about midnight. So basically, there's someone up there just repeating of what Jasper went going over in his statement and in court, not really remembering whether it was at the weekend or during the week, and then focusing again on not being able to take the police back to the area. Now, the man that Billy Jasper mentioned that paid him to drive that evening was Jesse Gale, who, coincidentally enough, was killed at the same year as Mick and Jack's trial. It was in fact after the sentencing of Mick and Jack and not before, for all the conspiracy theories. And this is an article from back when Jesse Gale was killed in that car crash. From the 13th of June 1998, death crash driver over the limit and speeding. The driver of a Range Rover, funnily enough, involved in one of Kent's worst road crashes was over the drink drive limit and speeding, Dartford Coroner's Court heard. 5 people died in the horrific smash in October last year on the M20 just outside Swanley. Coroner Roger Hatch returned verdicts of accidental death on all 5 victims at an inquest last week. The court heard that a Range Rover being driven by Jesse Gale, 43, from Dagenham, crossed the central reservation into the path of oncoming traffic. The Range Rover flew across the crash barrier onto the opposite carriageway where it smashed into a Vauxhall Carlton driven by Mr. Benton, 63, from Sidcup Entham. Mr. Benton, his wife Pat, and passengers from Thamesmead all died in the crash. They were on their way home from a day trip to France. According to the police evidence, there was nothing wrong with Mr. Gale's vehicle, which was also hit by 3 oncoming cars. At the time of the accident, he was driving at more than 70 miles per hour and was over the maximum drink drive levels. The police estimated that Mr. Benton had less than 1 second to react when Mr. Gale's Range Rover came onto the carriageway. Distressed relatives wept in court as the details of the accident were recounted. Firemen from Dartford and Lakefield attended the scene, along with police helicopter and the Kent Air Ambulance. Jesse Gale being killed in, coincidentally, another Range Rover, which seems to be a theme again within this case. Headbags and Range Rovers. Now, when it came to Billy Jasper's story, Dibley pretty much shut down any investigation into Jasper's version of events, with basically saying it did not fit with the strategic direction of the intelligence that he already had. In other words, he was focused on Mick Steele and never lost his focus. Now, apart from the time of the midnight shooting or the midnight drop-off of Mr. D, one other thing that sticks out about the whole version of events that Billy Jasper told the police was that if it's not true, then how did Billy Jasper know that driving the police to Rectory Lane, there was a route from Rectory Lane to Workhouse Lane where the 3 were found murdered? Jasper gave an extremely detailed and compelling account of the murders just after a month after the assassinations, before anyone had any real detail. He stated who was responsible, who arranged it, and why. He maintained that story throughout 3 separate interviews and his drive to the scene. He also wrote a detailed 12-page statement overnight with a lot of detail. Those that Jasper named were and are serious organised criminals, and the motive given makes perfect sense. The motive being that the bait to get the 4 down the lane was 4 kilograms of cocaine, and that the motive for the murder of at least Tony Tucker was his involvement in stealing some of the proceeds of a large cash robbery. Those who investigated the robbery interviewed Tony Tucker as part of the investigation. He was allegedly involved in laundering the cash proceeds through the various nightclubs he ran the doors for. The suggestion is that Tony was spending the robbery proceeds, not expecting those to be involved to be coming out, but following an appeal, they were released from prison in 1995. Coincidentally, the same year that Tony was murdered alongside Pat and Craig. Well, whether this is true or just another theory, Billy Jasper's version of events has definitely a lot more weight that's probably the wrong word to use, a lot more weight than Darren Nichols' version of events. No offence, Darren, I didn't mean that as a dig as like, your weight or anything, because, I don't know how big you are, because there's no pictures of you out there on the internet. Well, technically there is a couple. There's a pixelated photo, which if you know the right places, it's been unpixelated. You've got some funky eyebrows, no offence. And there's also the photo of Darren apparently in the Sunday People when he was caught back in 2009, dealing on the West Coast, I think it was. East Coast, West Coast, South Coast, no, down near Bristol, wherever. God, give me a compass. But yeah, Darren was apparently caught down in Bristol, according to the Sunday People, and he was dealing down in the area, or growing, ripping people off. And that photo was apparently Darren, and he's quite a chunky lad, and he's always been described in anyone that's ever described Darren has always described him as a big guy, so hence the little jib about food then. But if you are listening, Darren, again, if you listen to any of these Crime Scene to Courtroom or any of the channels that do anything on the Essex Boys, if you're listening, feel free to get in touch somehow, don't know how, leave a comment, and let me know if it is true, you know, how big, or if you've in fact lost weight since then. Because like I say, on one of the previous rants, stress is meant to bring weight loss. So right about now, with all the stress with everything that's been coming to light lately, with the fact that your version of events is probably, meh, then you should be flapping a little bit. And if that's the case, you should be, very skinny by now. You should be, in fact, one of the skinniest people in the world, but you probably aren't skinny, because the rumours are that you'll even listening to this. The rumours are that you just don't care about anything, and you just none of it is a worry to you. But there are more rumours about Darren Nichols than there is conspiracy theories regarding this case. But back to Billy Jasper. Whether he's telling the truth or not, there is, like I say, more weight to this story than Darren Nichols' version of Two Fairy Stories. Even though Darren does have the book and the documentary, but the motive for the murders seemed to be very strong, and there was a lot more truth coming out. The biggest mystery: where were the three during the hours of 7 until midnight? If in fact the time that Billy says is true, not being able to remember what day, whether it's a weekend or a weekday, and obviously being kind of come across as a junkie. That's easily said when it comes to reputations and stuff like that on when it is in court. And he has himself admitted he was on coke, but not everyone sort of remembers the days of the week as well as most people. And Darren Nichols' version of events did have a lot borrowed from Billy's, apart from the obvious route. But would Billy really be able to find Rectory Lane, having never visited there before, having obviously been visited there before at night? But the entrance to Workhouse Lane was apparently quite a hard place to find anyway. It wasn't signposted. It was literally just a lane, just an offcut that you just saw. So the fact of Billy didn't lead him directly to that lane, he took him to where Mr. D wanted being dropped off. There is a route there. Makes sense. It just doesn't make sense why the police didn't take Billy Jasper's story and investigate it at all and find the dots that are now there, and they connect. But I say, it seems from the moment the Range Rover was found down the lane from the Essex police, Mick Steele was the man they wanted to get him off the street for the importing. And alongside Mick was Jack. Jack now is home, back with his family, enjoying life. And unfortunately for Mick, who's still in prison and not up for parole till 2023, but hopefully, if this case is overturned at some point, his conviction is overturned, and the CCRC come up with a decision that their convictions weren't rightly so, then Mick could be out by the end of this year. But a lot don't believe Mick is actually going to get out of prison. But fingers crossed on that for Mick. And like I say, a little reminder, if you are going to go and visit Workhouse Lane at any point, do remember that is private land down there, and Mr. Theobald does own that land. So if you're thinking about popping down and have a little picnic or so, you're not going to find any little burger vans down there, unfortunately. And I say, please respect the place down there if you're going to go down and visit. And I'm pretty sure Theobald is used to all the visits of all the people down there. And like I say, the podcast with John Womes and Steve Nipper Ellis, there's more news of that coming out at the moment. There is some more news that I've just recently found out that's pretty big, connected to the interviews. More will come out soon. At the time of listening to this, if it's gone sort of April time, I'm sure that it's going to be around and about on YouTube somewhere. Check the comments on this video for any links to the upcoming podcast. And like I say, check out Liquid Bullet Productions for all the interviews I've had recently and the original Steve Nipper Ellis Q&A. And I'm sure I'll be back with another rant once Nipper's follow-up interview does happen, which is arranged for in a couple of weeks' time. Sooner the better on that one, to get the answers that we need. And I'll see you soon. Take care.